The esteemed Director McFadden is here.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Nice geology, Tony.
Yes. Henry Canyon.
My wife, the geologist, needs to see the synclines and anticlines there.
This one's pretty good right here.
Yeah.
That set of rocks has had a tortured life.
That has.
I had a college structural geology professor who says, "This is what you get when God is pissed off."
Good enough.
So Tony Morgan,
Mhm.
there were some geology students or PhD candidates, I think, from Michigan that did a bunch of studies of rocks at Timber Canyon and other places in the county. And their conclusion from the rocks in Timber Canyon is that I think what they're saying is that faulting is like 10 million years old, older than the connection to the San Andreas fault.
Oh, really?
So I'll send you their reports.
Okay.
Eldon Gath said, yeah, those are interesting, but they don't actually make any defense of them or so
It's just a PhD. You don't have to really
yeah.
have any data to back it up.
Not
Well,
interesting.
yeah.
Relative thing.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
Yeah, I'll send them to you.
that'd be great. Thanks.
I don't know why.
Nice background, Tony.
Thanks.
Beautiful.
Sounds like something to sit with an adult beverage in your hand and read.
Very modern. Hi, everyone.
Hello. Beautiful picture.
Thank you. My connection's not so great right now, so I'm going to be off camera, but I'm here.
Alrighty.
Let's see. So Kelly is not going to be joining us. Candace will be a little tardy.
We're just waiting on Glenn.
Okay.
Now.
There he is.
There's Glenn.
Oh, there he is. Voila.
Right on cue. I think it's right at 5 o'clock. Are we ready to go, staff?
Yes.
Getting nods and happy faces. Okay, I'll call the meeting to order at 5 p.m. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me in the pledge. Hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It's always strange to do that when everybody's on mute. You feel like I'm the only one in the room saying it.
We're right here with you.
Thank you. Eva, labeled as Chris, would you mind doing a roll call for us, please?
Sure. Director Kimball.
I are here. Sorry.
Okay. Vice Chair McFadden.
Here.
Hey, Director Pace.
Here.
Director Villaseñor.
Here.
Perfect. All four are here.
Okay, we'll note when Candace is able to join us a little later. Okay, we'll move on to item 1C. Are there any public comments?
There's no.
I'm not sure who can monitor this whole thing.
I can see who's.
Okay. Eva, if you, I can see parts, but I can't see the whole thing. So
Yeah, I'll
Uh,
keep
see
an
you.
eye.
see anybody waving their hand madly who wants to comment to
No.
us? Okay. Got to give everybody a chance.
Yes.
All right, we'll move on to item 1D. Tony, are there any changes that need to be made to the agenda for tonight?
Director McFadden, no changes proposed to the agenda.
Okay, then I would look for a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Okay, motion by Glenn, second by Gordon.
We need a roll call vote.
Yes.
Keep us honest there, Steve. Thank you.
Director
Okay.
Kimball,
Aye.
Vice Chair McFadden,
Aye.
Director Pace,
Aye.
Director Villaseñor.
Aye.
Perfect. Okay, all four.
Okay, very good. The agenda is approved. Let's move on to director updates. Gordon, do we have anything new from the Fillmore pumpers?
Nope, the board was dark this month and I don't really have any other updates.
Okay, Glenn, Pyru pumpers?
I guess similar, no real updates. Maybe just a couple of things related to Pyru and to myself. We're still targeting for a June, having a decision on the sale of the water company and that transition taking over in mid-July. That could take place sooner, but likely that's kind of the target base right now. And I know I jumped on right at 5. Maybe you guys had some conversations. Did you guys already mention about Frank Bromanchenkl?
No.
So he passed away this week on Monday. And so that news was just kind of going out. We heard Monday evening from his daughter. And so I'm sure that's kind of rippling through the water world for those of us that have interacted with Frank in Ventura County and throughout the state for other people. But for us, he's been a huge resource, and it's going to be difficult to find someone with that kind of knowledge and stuff, I think. So anyway, for those that didn't know, that is kind of some sad news that happened this week. And that's all I have for an update.
Thanks, Glenn. I had not heard. I appreciate you sharing that with the group. Okay, well, Candace isn't here, so we'll circle back to her later. Christina, do you have anything from the city of Fillmore you'd like to share with us?
We don't have anything really to report to you right now from the city of Fillmore. We are updating some zoning ordinances, and we're looking at, just for information, looking at ADUs and making sure that we know that they're allowed by law, but we're looking to make sure in our areas around our particularly fire hazard near the hillside of limiting that. So that's something that we talked about at City Council, and it's going to come up again soon. So that's it for me.
Thank you. I see Candace is joining us. Candace, do you want to jump in with the environmental stakeholder director update? Or do you want to be last in line?
Sorry, I can go. Yesterday evening, Jim Danza, our chair at Friends of the Santa Clara River, did a presentation on a bikeway from the headwaters of the Santa Clara River watershed through down to the coast. We're also having discussions about reinvigorating the Santa Clara River Parkway project. And ultimately, that's to show how open space and farmland is integral to flood management in Ventura County. And then the other thing was, I don't know if folks are aware, but Assembly Member Steve Bennett has passed a piece of legislation which is going to provide or request better oversight of well applications of groundwater sustainability agencies. I believe that was made public today. And ultimately, that's coming from the fact that counties oversee well permits, but aren't really familiar with what the goals are of GSAs. And we've spoken a little bit about cooperative management around that. And historically, the county has come to us as a GSA to have us weigh in on whether or not we'd approve a well application. So I think it's kind of addressing that disconnect between county oversights and issuing of well permits and then GSA management in accordance with the GSPs. I think that's it for my update. Thanks.
Thank you, Candace. And just so you know, I think your connection is limited and we're getting some pretty different feedback on your audio. Not sure what's happening there. One comment I'll make is we're fortunate to have the county supervisor as part of this GSA. So the county is strongly connected to our GSA. Okay, United Water, I don't really have anything that I'd like to update the group with. Let's go on to item 2B, Executive Director update. Mr. Emmert, what do you have for us?
A few things. One of these days I might have something that I have nothing to say, but I do have a couple updates. I wanted to report to this board that we have been making some progress on the monitoring well siting. That has taken us quite a while to get the land agreements in place for the monitoring wells project, and it's looking like we should have something to bring to your board for approval in the very near future. So those are really two different landowners. So the state of California with the 3 monitoring wells that are triangulated around the Cienega site, and then a multiple completion well that's out on I believe Mike Brucker owned property out near the East Grove to the west. I always find it interesting saying the East Grove is to the west, but that's very encouraging. We are still interested in looking for another site that would be near the Sespe confluence, but that information is probably not as critical to this agency, and we could take maybe a little bit more time in doing that. So, but we do want to stay on track and getting those approved by both parties, so we can get those monitoring wells constructed before the end of this calendar year. Groundwater extraction fees and collection statements for the July to December 2021 period have been mailed out. So folks should be seeing those soon if they haven't already. Groundwater sustainability planning grant. So we are already almost to the end of another quarter. So staff will be working on summarizing progress report number 12 and invoice number 12. It's hard to imagine that 12 quarters have gone by since we've been working on this grant, but we have, and a lot of good work has been done. And just a reminder for anyone who hasn't done their California Fair Political Practices Form 700. So those are due to the county clerk of the board before April 1st. So I was a little bit late on that, but I did get mine done this week. It was simple, but I was just doing other things before. But so if anybody still has to do those are due pretty soon now. And that's really, one other thing I did want to bring up, especially since we were talking about well construction. As this board's aware, the county moratorium for well construction did lift at the end of, at the time that our GSPs were uploaded. And so there have been a couple, I believe 4 well permits that were approved by the county. 3 were I think all of them were replacements. People had been waiting. I believe there were 3 that were really small domestics, and there was one that was a replacement of a failed well. So that's most of the anticipated activity. And so if your board would like, we could share those with you. But at this point, the county's approving ones like that, and they're just sharing those with us. Of course, if we want to, put some sideboards on some of that at some time in the future, that's something that I think we should do, especially concerning GDE areas and or exports out of the basin that might be in excess of what's within our plan. So that's something that staff will work on, but we'll keep you apprised of any replacement wells and things that come to the county's hopper. And fortunately for us, we have a really good relationship with the county of Ventura, and it's the Public Works Agency, the Water Resources Department that approves those. In LA County, for example, it's the Public Health Department that approves wells. And so there's a big disconnect from the water people and the people who approve wells. We have a very close relationship here in this county, and we share information. So I don't think we're going to get out of sync on that part, and we'll keep you updated as we go forward. And that's all I have. Acting Chairman McFadden.
Candace, I see your hand up. Do you have a question for Mr. Emmer?
Yeah, with regards to the CESP confluence site, I was wondering if Councilmember Villaseñor could weigh in, but we've been discussing a bike trail offline outside of the GSA. And I was under the impression that there were some properties that were for sale, or at least some of the easements might be under potential negotiation. And I was wondering if that might actually be one of the locations of the confluence that might be helpful for a monitoring well.
Sure, let me give you a quick update. There's no actual movement, but let me, I don't think I've told the board about this. One of the projects that I've been looking at for the city of Fillmore is connecting our bike path along the Santa Clara River. We have like about 150-meter gap between a new bike path that was created with our new developments, the bridges and the KB homes. It's an asphalt levee path, and then it kind of just drops off, and it then continues underneath the 23 bridge, a concrete path, and it goes along the other south part of our residences. I've talked to Candace. So I found out that it's the Fillmore Irrigation Company that I think has this parcel. I've reached out to Chris Woodard. I've been kind of playing some phone tag with Barb Silkins. Again, I'm sorry for my connection. And so I plan to actually go to the Fillmore Irrigation Company board meeting and just try to propose this project to them. On the environmental side of a potential nonprofit that may be interested, I spoke with Candace. She connected me with the Nature Conservancy, Friends of Santa Clara River, and it sounds like the Nature Conservancy might be in the best position for such a project. It's just I haven't been able to bring everyone together. I really wanted to connect with the Fillmore Irrigation Company. They did tell me previously a few months ago that they were actually looking to sell this parcel, and I think others. So I first thought maybe the city of Fillmore might be interested. Doesn't look like the city of Fillmore's interested in picking up more property. We're trying to let go of property. But maybe an environmental nonprofit may be able to work out a deal for the community benefit here. So that's a little bit of background, and I'm like I said, just trying to get a hold of the board there at Fillmore Irrigation Company and see if this is a potential project.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Candace?
Tony, I think Christina had provided a map, and I can send that on to you. And if it's close to the confluence, that might be worth exploring. If it's an easement sort of agreement, if they're open to options.
Yeah, please do.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
we'll take a look at that with Dan Detmer and I will take a look at that and you know, we can, if it looks like it's a good place to gather the data, then we can push that one forward. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. I'll send that map out to everybody. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to item 2C. Mr. O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. President. A couple of items to address with the board today. You may recall from the last meeting, we have a debtor to the agency, the Suncrest organization, that has filed bankruptcy. I believe it's somewhere in the order of $35,000 that they owe the agency. The bankruptcy filing has been filed. We're waiting on the proposed plan that he has to submit to the court and the creditors. When we get that, we'll review that plan and bring it to the board for consideration, because we do have an opportunity to object to the plan. So we'll keep an eye on that, and once we get a copy, we'll agendize that for the board to discuss. Also, just on the report on Assembly Bill 361, I know that there's a lot of COVID restrictions being relaxed right now, but AB 361 is still in place and allows us to continue to meet through these remote meetings, and you'll see a resolution on item 3D today. I think it's on your consent calendar to continue to meet remotely, but recall we have to do that on a monthly basis, make those findings. And the last order of business is more of my business than water business, but I informed Tony that recently we had just concluded negotiations for my partner and I to move our water practice to another law firm, a firm called Alishire and Winder, which is a firm that represents a lot of municipal governments, mostly cities in Southern California. That's effective April 1st. And we just concluded the negotiations, and Tony wasn't able to get it on the agenda, but as of April 1st, I'll be working with another firm, which of course implicates the contract that my current firm has with the agency. So I spoke to Tony about this, and I'd ask if we could agendize a contract for the next meeting for the board's consideration, or whatever the board's pleasure is. I'm not sure if the board wants to go out to RFP or just consider continuing my relationship with the board through a new contract with the Alishire firm. But as of April 1, I'm going to be at another firm, and the existing agreement will not be operative. So I wanted to see if I could get some direction from the board on how they want to give Tony and I some direction on how to proceed addressing this.
Tony Emmert, what would be your recommendation for how we could handle this properly as a board?
Chair McFadden, I do recommend that we're careful on evaluating potential conflicts, just because we have 3 member agencies. So I will follow up with legal counsel of City of Fillmore, County of Ventura, and United, and I think at the very least we should consider that. It has been about 4 years or so that we've had this relationship with our legal counsel. So certainly, if the pleasure of the board was to look at what other firms we have, I don't necessarily recommend doing that at this point, but that certainly is a possibility at the board's pleasure. Fortunately for us, we don't have a major legal workload at the moment, but we do want to have legal counsel back serving our agency soon. So at the very least, I will put it on my list to follow up regarding whether any of these agencies see a conflict with the Alisher and Winder. Is that the way it's pronounced properly? Alisher,
Alshire and Winder.
Alshire and Winder.
And I will note, Tony, that, we shared earlier that the Alshire firm presently represents the city of Fillmore.
Okay, yes, that's an important point. So I think at the very least we can do that, and we can definitely get an item agendized for our next meeting in which we could take some real action. At this point, it's just information.
Mr. O'Neill, can we have any comments or discussion from the board at this point?
Yeah, I think that it would be appropriate to have, it wouldn't be a Brown Act violation at this point. This is the attorney report, and this does involve my role as your attorney. As an action item, no, but if the board wants to discuss this item without giving us any or taking any formal action, I think that would be okay. Because the one issue that I wanted to raise with Tony was that until the April meeting, or between April 1 and the April meeting, you'll technically be without counsel. And I just want to make sure that you're aware of that. And that could be solved with a short agreement between Tony and I, if you wanted to keep me in place until it gets before the full board as an action item.
Okay, then I think what I'd like to do is just open it up to the board for comments, if we can do that.
So I have just kind of one comment, question, or thing. I know that I'm sure the legal world is a little different as a consultants and stuff. In my world as a civil engineer, when I have a contract with a company, and if one of our engineers leaves, the contract stays with the company, and someone else, another engineer, would backfill that position. So if that's not the way it works here, maybe I can be clarified. But is our contract currently with an individual or with a company? And what's the position of that company? Would they not just take over when Mr. O'Neill leaves? And so, I mean, how does that work? And what is the legal kind of the way the contract works?
Do you want me to address that, Tony?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Director Pace. Yes, your contract is with the entity, and the entity is the firm Olivares, Madruga, Lemieux, O'Neill. Lemieux and O'Neill we were the water kind of arm of AMLO. We're taking that practice to this new firm. The Olivares Madruga firm represents cities and school districts. I believe they have one other small water related agency, and that's the San Gabriel Valley Water Quality Authority, which is manages a cleanup effort of some VOCs in the San Gabriel Valley. So essentially, the contract is with an entity. They are going to be changing the name of that entity and changing the structure of that entity effective April 1st. We're essentially splitting up with our partners and taking our practice to another firm. Does that address your question?
Yeah, I guess I assume then that is there some kind of, do we need to have some kind of documentation that says that entity doesn't exist anymore? I guess now you're saying that's just the contract becomes null and void as of September.
Yeah, the contract will be rescinded, and we have an internal agreement amongst the partners that we each go our separate ways. That's and so that it's a limited partnership that has a dissolution provision embedded in it, and we're going to enact that dissolution provision.
Okay, so no one's sitting there saying, "Hey, don't take our clients" or anything. Okay, so that's not an issue.
It's I guess an amicable divorce, I guess.
Okay. I wanted to make sure that we don't have another issue from my perspective that somebody else is saying, hey, wait a second, we are going to continue covering you. We want to keep serving you. And so that was kind of my question.
It's a good question, Director, because our intent going into this partnership 4 years ago was that there would be a fair amount of crossover and synergy between, our joke was 2 + 2 will equal 5, right? And it's really hasn't happened. We've been operating in separate silos, frankly, for the probably TMI, but for over the past year, we've had separate accounting, no crossover in terms of lawyers working on other stuff. So we decided it's kind of easier to be separate, and we want to go to this new firm because it offers us a bigger platform, more litigation support, and more labor and employment support.
But the bottom line is, as of April 1st, the business or the firm we have a contract with no longer exists. So we no longer have legal representation.
That's correct.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So that's pretty short notice to do anything about for a public agency.
Yeah, I apologize for that. We just concluded our negotiations, and I emailed Tony about if he could put this on the agenda as an action item. However, the agenda had already been posted.
Steve, is there any?
Follow-up question be, would we have to have a special meeting between now and April if we did want to go with Steve O'Neill at the new?
That would be the board's pleasure. It would be completely appropriate to have a special meeting if the board wants that and if we're ready.
But the other option is to do a full RFP and then be without legal counsel for a period.
Or also, did I hear about maybe signing like a short-term agreement to sort of just fill in that gap period? And would that be just with Mr. O'Neill, just sort of representing the agency for, again, set number of days, as with his expertise in this area of law?
That would be a possibility, but the issue there, Director Villasenor, is that would require board action to execute that type of agreement. And
Got it.
yeah, absent a special meeting on 24 hours notice, I don't know that the executive officer enjoys that authority because all your other consultant agreements have come to the board.
That's correct,
Okay.
Director Villasenor. I think that would be appropriate should the board wish to take the opportunity to, shake the bushes and see if there's another law firm. So if the board would wish to take the RFP type route, I think we would definitely want to do a short-term agreement to make sure that we're covered. If we're able to assure ourselves that there are no potential conflicts, and if or we identify them and they're minimized, or we're able to address those, then it would be better to just move forward, I think, with a contract with the new firm, with our existing legal counsel people. So with Steve O'Neill.
Tony or Steve, is there any requirement that we go through an RFP process if we're going to make a change as a public agency?
For these types of services, no. There is no statutory requirement that you go to RFP or RFQ for consulting services. But as you know, it's generally kind of generally accepted practices for certain services.
I see Christina has her digital hand up.
Yes, thank you. No, I just wanted to share with the board that I did speak with Tiffany Israel, our city attorney, and actually on a new partner with Alshire and Winder about this. And she said that if this were to go forward, out of an abundance of caution, that they would ask the city of Fillmore and the GSA to each sign a conflict waiver. And seeing that currently that there aren't any currently any adverse positions between the city or the GSA, if both entities again would want to do this, choose to do this, there could be a signed waiver, and they could, and Alshire and Winder could continue to represent both entities. So that's information I have from our city attorney.
Yes,
share that.
I've had that discussion as well, Director, and under the rules of professional conduct for attorneys, you don't need an actual conflict. It's just the mere potential for a conflict we have to address. And so any agreement that we'd entered into, that we would possibly enter into with the agency would address that, identify that, and we'd execute written conflict waivers to move forward.
I think what I would suggest that we do is direct our executive director to look into any potential conflicts, that we set a special meeting, perhaps just a one agenda item meeting, and with enough time to allow the parties to put together a contract that we could look at. And unless it's the board's pleasure that we go through a more formal search process. Would that be acceptable to the board? Can I ask that question, Steve? Can we direct Tony in that direction?
Yes.
We've worked with
I'm
our
in agreement
attorneys
with
for
that.
some. Okay. We're not taking a formal vote or anything.
You give instruction to staff. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
And
Now
with that, we would get an idea of the impact of any cost differences with moving to this new firm. Because I know that was part of the discussions that we looked at as quality and cost, things like that, when we made our original decisions.
Yes, yes, Director Pace, there'd be a contract that would have those, all those provisions for your consideration.
Okay.
Would you foresee any major changes in the contract?
No, we are making every effort with all of our client base to maintain the same rates where we are now.
Okay.
It's good to know.
And I
Is
think Chair McFadden, we could also provide information on the, you obviously know Mr. O'Neill well, but we don't, I can't assume that we all know the new firm. So, we could provide your board with information on the firm as well as the rate schedule. I believe that I shared, I already have a draft agreement should you want to go that way. So we will move forward with that direction and look for a spot that we can have a special one agenda item meeting in the near future.
I think we're learning that the individuals are maybe more important than the firm, as long as the details don't change too much. And we certainly have a lot of experience with Mr. O'Neill, and he knows us better than anyone.
Well, thank you for your consideration. Again, I apologize for the kind of awkwardness of this late notice, but some of these things were kind of beyond my control, frankly.
Are we in an informal agreement as a board that that's the direction to go with? I see a few nods here.
Informal agreement, yes.
Okay. I'm not seeing any frowns or shaking heads, but Candace, you cut out on us a bit, so we have a still photo of you.
Oh, well, I'm in agreement. Sorry about
Okay,
that.
there, we got you back. We got you back. Okay. All right. Is there anything else from our legal counsel tonight?
That concludes my report. Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to item 2D, GSP consultant update. Mr. Morgan. Tony, if you're talking, I'm not hearing you.
Same. So, yeah.
Here we go. Let's try this again. Is that better?
I hear you now.
All right. So we got just a few things to go over tonight. Nothing very extensive. Just wanted to give you an update on some of the items that have been completed as ongoing activities with our group. So the draft annual reports are prepared. That's agenda item 4A for discussion later on. So I won't spend any more time on that and steal Gus's thunder on that effort, but we're still under the guise of providing DWR with the finalized documents before or on April 1st, whichever. So we've got updates to the online database, water levels, water quality, that kind of thing have been completed. There's some GSP implementation planning meetings that are ongoing that have occurred since the last board meeting. So those kinds of things are completed. I guess the implementation planning could be construed as an ongoing effort as well. We've got the annual reports that I just mentioned to finalize as upcoming. One other thing is we have, as a part of our annual reports contract, the task to add the redacted well completion reports to the online database. And so if you recall, the state of California doesn't want you to put in a public releasable form the addresses of the well owners and that kind of thing. So we have sort of a mixed bag of well completion reports that are currently in the online database, but are removed from public access right now. And so we need to go through a process of redacting that well owner information from the well completion report. So that'll be an ongoing activity. There'll still be some implementation planning meetings as we move forward and talk about what are we going to do at the Cienega Springs Restoration Project, et cetera, with the new monitoring wells and the other project and management actions that were outlined in the GSPs. A couple of new things to think about. Right now, DBSNA is hosting the online database on our servers. And so the question is, do you wish to continue that? Do you wish to move that? What would you like to do? And there are pros and cons to either way. If you're interested in DBSNA continuing to host that, it's a minuscule amount of money per month. It's like $100 to $150 a month to have that hosting contract with us. And then we take care of all the virus protection, backup files and all that kind of stuff. So, but it is up to you. It's your database. If you'd like to have it hosted somewhere else, you can look into that as well. But again, no decisions on that tonight. That's just getting it on your radar so that we can begin to talk about that. And then there is a new batch of subsidence data out from DWR. And so is the board interested in the not too distant future of having an update on what that subsidence data are telling us? Because you do have a project management action in the GSP for your consideration on potentially implementing a subsidence monitoring network. So this might be some useful information for you to see to get you prepped for continuing that discussion about that particular project action. So that's it on my end, kind of short and sweet. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to entertain those.
Tony, do you need direction on the subsidence update now? Would you like us to smile and shake our heads?
That's entirely up to you, or smile and nod your head to the executive director.
Not,
and then,
yeah, whatever.
Whichever you'd like to do.
Yeah,
It doesn't necessarily have to be tonight, but it can be at your pleasure.
Presumably both of these need to be agendized
Yes.
for next meeting.
Okay.
And with that, your updates to online database, does that easily come with the annual report preparation, or is that logical to put it as part of the, or does it need to be part of not only hosting but updating the online database? Maybe that's part of a broader discussion, or because I hadn't really thought about that, but keeping that database current is fundamental to its value, and it's a valuable database. So it's probably something we need to think about.
We included it in the annual report effort this year because that just seemed, well, timing wise, that was the appropriate place to do it. And as Gus will relay a little bit to you later on, we use that online database to extract information that goes into the annual report. And so it's just a nice, convenient way to organize all the information. And so the information that we're using to prepare the annual report is also the same information the public has access to and the directors have access to. So we're all looking at the same set of information at that point in time. So keeping it update is a nice thing to do, but it's also a GSA's requirement to do that per Sigma. I don't think it's necessary to update it more than once a year. I think once a year is probably adequate. That's up to board's pleasure if you found value in having it updated more frequently than that. But remember, you don't get your pumping information but a couple of times a year anyway. So I think that probably is sufficient.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, are there any other questions for our GSP consultant? Okay, let's
Right, thank
move
you.
on to, thank you, Tony. We'll talk to you soon. Let's move on to item number 3, consent calendar. We have 4 items. We can approve them all in one blanket motion, or if somebody wants to pull something out and discuss, we can do that too. What's the pleasure of the board?
I move to approve.
Okay, we have a motion by Director Pace. Is there a second? But not a very popular item tonight.
I'll second.
All right.
Can you
Director
hear me?
Kimball will. Now we can now. Are you, sorry, Christina, were you trying to speak? Director Villasenor, I think we're losing your audio. Okay, well, we have a motion and a second. Eva, may we have a roll call, please?
Sure. Director Kimball,
Aye.
Vice Chair McFadden,
Aye.
Director Minigan,
Aye.
Director Pace,
Aye.
Director Villasenor.
Aye.
Perfect. All
There
approved.
she is. Okay, the motion passes unanimously. Okay, let's move on to item number 4. Tony, is this you again? Or Tony Morgan, excuse me.
Yes,
Mr. Morgan.
Dr. Tully's going to take the lead on talking about the annual reports tonight. So I'll pass the
Thank you.
baton to him.
Hello, everyone. This is Chairman, members of the board. Good evening, afternoon, I guess now. Happy St. Patrick's Day. So I'm going to be going over, let me move this out of the way. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Excellent.
You're not in presentation mode though.
Yes.
Gus. There you go. Now you are.
So I'm going to be going over the draft annual reports that we have started working on. They're still in progress, so things will change a little bit. But what we sent out is the general format and generally the length that we're looking at for these annual reports. And so we covered this last meeting, but I just wanted to remind everybody, these are due every year, hence the name annual reports. And these are summarizing the hydrologic conditions for the previous water year. So October to September of each year is the water year. So just think of the calendar year, but shifted backwards by 3 months. And these are, again, short, sweet, to the point is how we're looking at them. And so the way that we've gone about trying to actually develop these is using an automated workflow. And so I use, it's a software called R. It's a statistical program, but it does plotting and it can do a whole lot of spatial analysis, which is really cool. And so what we're doing is, you see at the top here, these are just snippets of the actual code that we're using to develop these. And so we can scrape our database management system for all of the new data. So part of our efforts for the annual report preparation was to update the database. And so that allows us for, in the script, so we can just say, give me the data for this specific water year. And you can see here in the text, where you see these pink items, I can actually do the calculations directly in the text. So if we're looking at, say, average water levels for all the representative monitoring points, we can do all the spatial analysis. All that can be done automatically. And so we can then look at that data and then go through the interpretations. And so it really dramatically reduces the amount of time it takes after these have been developed. So it's kind of the rule of thumb with scripting is it generally takes 3 to 10 times longer than to do it normally, but you save a lot of time on the back end. And since you're going to be doing this for the next 50 years, it makes sense to develop these at the front end. And so we'll just start off with a general summary for both basins, and then we'll get into some more of the nitty-gritty details and what we're actually presenting in these annual reports. So for the Fillmore subbasin, water levels changed in all, so not just representative monitoring wells, but any wells where we had a water level observation that was within 2 weeks on either side of April 1st of each year or October 1st of each year. So April 1st is our spring water level measurement, and October is our fall water level measurement. So the difference between the water levels would be from basically October to October. So beginning of the water year to the end of the water year. And so in Fillmore, they changed between negative 10 feet. So water levels dropped in some wells, and we had one well that went up by 14 feet. The average of all the wells, they dropped by about 4 feet. This is pretty consistent. It was a critically dry year, so we would expect water levels to decrease. There's only one of the representative monitoring points that is approaching the minimum threshold that's been established. I believe in this basin, there are, this sub-basin, there are 12 representative monitoring points. And so 1 out of 12 is approaching the minimum threshold. The current trend has tapered off a little bit, so it's not as bad as it was previously. So that's just one well to keep an eye on. Everything else is looking pretty good, and I'll have an example of that a little bit later. The groundwater extractions, we've estimated it for this year because only the first 6 months of pumping data for 2021 was available. For next year, you're going to be collecting that data on a quarterly basis. And so that will coincide with our water years. So we won't have to do this estimate next year. The way that we did it is for municipal pumping, we just took that first half of the year and then just multiplied it by 2 because municipal pumping is relatively consistent month over month. For the agricultural pumping, we looked at the historical ratio between the first half and the second half of the year and tried to scale that accordingly if that data was available. If it wasn't, then we would just multiply by 2 as a quick estimate. And so I just want to reiterate that this number will likely change on the next annual report when we actually have that data that has come in. And so our estimated change in storage for Fillmore Basin is about, it went down by about 14,000 acre feet. And again, this is consistent with it being a critically dry year. As Tony likes to say, you know, we live in the wet years, and that's where we make our money. And so this is pretty consistent with what we've experienced as far as storage changes in previous years. And again, this is estimated. Because we didn't have the model for this, we actually used the changes in water levels to estimate this. And so there's a bit of uncertainty that goes along with that calculation. And for the Piru subbasin, water levels went down a little bit more. Average change was about negative 2.5 feet, and then one well had almost 50 feet. The average for all the wells was about 35 feet. So quite a bit more in the Piru Basin compared to the Fillmore Basin. There's one representative monitoring point that is approaching its minimum threshold. At its current trend, it's projected to exceed the minimum threshold this summer if things don't change. So just something that the board should keep in mind. That's the purpose of these annual reports, to make you aware of these conditions that are happening in the basin. But again, this is one of, I believe, I think 8 representative monitoring points that are in the basin, and the rest of them are still looking pretty good. Groundwater extractions totaled about 13,300 acre feet roughly. And again, we use the exact same methodology for calculating groundwater extractions in Piru as we did for Fillmore. And estimated change in storage is, we've currently calculated as negative 38,000 acre feet. This was likely overestimated because of the methodology that we used. The change in water levels, we only have water level data for a portion of the basin. And so we extrapolate that change to the entire basin. That assumes that the changes in water levels in the area that we have data is similar to the areas that we don't have data. And there's a large portion up Piru Creek, which likely hasn't experienced the same level of water level decline. And so this is likely an overestimate. Again, in the future, if we have the groundwater model that can be run, we can double check this. And I don't want to scare everyone. This number is likely high just because of the lack of data that we have for a fairly large portion of Piru Basin. And so we're going to get into the details. So we'll go through Fillmore Basin first, and then we'll go through Piru Basin. And before I continue, are there any questions that anybody has up to this point? Hearing none, I will continue on. And so a lot of these figures are specifically required in the GSP regulations. And so there's one page that outlines everything that needs to be included in the annual report. And our approach was to include all of that and not a bunch of extraneous details that DWR did not ask for. And so what you're seeing on this plot is these dashed lines are just showing the estimated water level elevation from water level measurements collected at these red dots. And you can see the well names on here. If you go to our online database management system, you can type this into the search and you can actually see what these water levels were. Nothing really exciting here. Flow is generally from east to west. We have a little bit of a north to south flow from this recharge that's coming in along the northern part of the basin. But this is relatively consistent with other contour maps that have been produced for the basin. They're slightly different in that we've included a few additional points over here where there's more recently collected data. And so these are higher up on the fan, and so the water levels are a little bit higher. But in general, these are very consistent with what's been published previously. This next one is in the fall. So DWR likes to see the spring high and then the fall low contour maps. They've been looking at these for, I have no idea how many years, but a very, very long time. And so they wanted these to be included in the annual report. What I'm showing here is one of the figures for Fillmore Basin. There's actually 4 of these because there's 12 monitoring points, so 3 points per graph. And this is just an example of the blue line here is showing the measurable objective that has been established for the well. And the red line is the minimum threshold. And these blue lines with the dots are showing the actual water level elevations. And so this is the one well that I described earlier, which is approaching its minimum threshold in Fillmore Basin, still hasn't reached it. And you can see even in the past, it's exceeded the current minimum threshold. As soon as there's a wet year, it pops back up. So a lot of this is consistent with previous behavior. You can see that this trend from basically the beginning of water year 2021 is very consistent with what we saw in 2013 when we had our previous drought. And so the other thing that DWR wants to show is some spatial distribution of what groundwater pumping looks like. And so we have split this up by agricultural groundwater extractions, municipal and industrial groundwater extractions, and then a total map of extractions. And so these are just generally showing where groundwater is being pumped in the basin. The darker the colors, the more water is being pumped, and the numbers correspond with the value that's pumped within this grid cell, which is the 1 square mile section in acre feet per year. And so we have, again, the agricultural groundwater extractions, municipal groundwater extractions. City of Fillmore is pretty much the single largest municipal pumper in the basin. And this map is just adding both of those numbers together from the previous maps and just showing total groundwater extractions for the entire basin. And another plot that DWR wanted us to include is a map of changes in groundwater storage. This is a little bit of a kind of a strange way to show groundwater change in storage. Hydrologists don't typically make these, but DWR asked for it, and so we are providing it to them. The colors here correspond with changes in groundwater storage that we have interpolated based on changes in groundwater elevation at these points. And so you'll notice that there's actually fewer red dots on here than we had in the water level maps, because we actually need 2 different observations to be able to make this map. We need a water level observation on the previous fall, and then a water level observation 1 year later to get that change over that water year. And so the main takeaway from this is that it looks like water levels went up a little bit on the north end and then went down on the south end. These dashed contour lines are just showing you what the general decline in water levels were. Again, this isn't meant to be scary. Storage in the basin went down, but in general, water levels in the represented monitoring points are still looking pretty good. And so this is a much more informative plot, which is showing the groundwater pumping in blue. So negative values means that the water is being extracted from the aquifer. And we've also plotted here negative values for storage means that the storage has gone down. Just to keep it consistent, because in the modeling, the signs are reversed and it always gets confusing. But basically negative values means water's coming out. And so this black line here is showing that cumulative change in storage. So this is if we sum all these gray boxes together. You'll notice that this doesn't start at 0 because we use the water budget that started in 1988 from the model. And so we can see that in the early part of the 2000, or in the beginning of 2000s, we were bouncing around right at about 0 cumulative change in storage, which is good. That's where you want to be. And then at the beginning of the 2012 to 2015, 2016 drought, you see that's where most of this decline in storage has happened. And you've maintained relatively consistently or even increased. And then this last couple of years, they've either maintained or dropped down. So in general, you're sitting at about negative 60,000 acre feet relative to the 1988 conditions. And you're not quite as bad as you were at the end of the last drought, but you are approaching those conditions. Are there any questions before I move on to Pyru?
No questions, but super helpful graphs. Sorry, that's on me. Oh, thank you.
So guess we go back to the slide on agricultural use. There was one in dark blue for 10,000 plus. Is that, can you explain what that is? Is it the Fillmore hatchery?
I think Tony might be able to weigh in. I'm still getting familiarized with the basin, so I'm not sure exactly who or what is doing this pumping. It's just within this grid cell, there was a well that, or there was several wells that collectively pumped 10,475 acre feet over the entire water year of 2021.
Okay, I saw in the chat Dan said yes.
Yes.
That's confirming. Right. And then my other, it's a question, maybe a comment. There's been a lot of discussion about after the rain events, the storage bounces back, but you're saying like this is a 60,000 acre feet negative.
So that 60,000 acre feet is really just relative to whatever the starting conditions were at the beginning of the model. So when we develop these models, we really don't know the total volume of water that's in the aquifer because there's a lot of underlying assumptions of that. It's really easy for us to track changes in storage, and so that's typically how we report these. It's a difference relative from some initial starting condition. And so that initial starting condition was in 1988. If I recall correctly, that was that may have, I can't remember if that was a wet period or a dry period. Because I know there was a little bit of a drought in the 80s. I think that was a wet period. So that was basically starting off relatively high at those conditions, if I remember correctly. But don't quote me on that one. I'd have to go back and look specifically.
If I can offer, if you take a look at the graph that's on the screen right now, you can see the bars at the bottom of the graph right there. There's sort of some pinky and some bluish colored ones there. The bluish colored ones are the wet years. And so you can see when there's a wet year there, you can see that the cumulative departure curve there for storage increases. Okay, the value gets smaller. So we're changing the water levels in the basin. And so we're getting more water in storage there. So that's the general concept. So you see that cumulative storage tells you if it goes up in this instance, meaning the value gets smaller. Okay, that means there's more water in storage. We've got higher water elevations in the basin.
Yeah, and you can see, and the majority of that came during the 2012 to 2016 drought. Right. That's where this large departure happened. And if you look at the bottom of this bar, there's a lot more red bars than blue or just blank bars. These are, what I consider, quote unquote, average years. And so there's been a lot more dry years than wet years recently. So hydrologically, we would kind of expect these conditions to occur because there's just a lot less water that's coming in on a long-term basis in the last 2 decades.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm noticing is we at our lowest in storage historically from when the model initiates. And that's just concerning for how we plan forward. If that trend continues with a couple more dry years, then we're going to have the least amount of storage we've ever had in the basin. I mean, I get that it rebounds with cumulative years, but I think we are also entering a state in the basin that we haven't seen before. It continues dry.
Yeah, and it's difficult because unfortunately we can't predict the future. So it may be that we have another wet year next year and things bounce back, or maybe there's another dry year. And so this is where that adaptive management that's part of Sigma comes in. Are there any other questions? Okay, I will move on to the Piru Basin. So again, same exact figure that we saw for Fillmore. These are the groundwater elevations in the spring. Same as what you've seen before. Flows generally from east to west through the basin. Nothing really exciting here. Fall water levels change slightly, but still have the same general trend. And the water levels in Piru Basin are a little bit lower relative to the measurable objectives compared to Fillmore Basin, but still well within the range between the minimum threshold and the measurable objective. The one well of concern is this 36 DO1S here, and this is the one where if this trend continues, it will exceed the minimum threshold this summer. And that's, again, if that trend continues. It looks like it broke in Fillmore Basin, and so it's possible that it may in Piru as well. But I just wanted to bring that to the board's attention. But generally, the other wells are still looking relatively strong, even though there have been declines. They're still not approaching their minimum thresholds yet. And this is the map of the estimated groundwater extractions that we have in the basin. And again, the municipal and industrial, so very similar pattern where we just have one area where most of the municipal and industrial pumping is occurring, and the total groundwater pumping for all areas in the basin.
Gus, can I interrupt for just a second? Are the other directors seeing the graphics that Gus is describing? Or
Yeah.
I seem to be a couple of slides behind, but that might be
Yes.
an issue with my system.
There was a link that was sent out earlier, so you can look at it on your computer. There may be a little bit of an internet lag.
Okay.
So I apologize. I will try to go a little bit slower to let your computer refresh.
Gus, I had a question. That
Mhm.
that Piru well that's potentially going to exceed its minimum threshold in the summer, where is that on the map? In which?
That is let's see, I believe that well is, all right, 041936 DO1S. This is where the database management system comes in. We got to showcase how awesome it is, because I use this thing all the time. And what did I say? It was 36 DO1S. 36 DO1S. And
You're looking at a Topper Creek confluence.
yeah, there we go. Yep, so right here. And that's one of the reasons why I try to include all of the well names on these. In case there are any questions, you can feel free to go to the database management system and look at the data yourself. So again, total groundwater extractions. And this is the plot that we came up with for the change in storage. And so this is what I was talking about earlier, is that relative to the entire basin area, We have a relatively small fraction of the basin where we actually have data. And so this entire area right here likely doesn't satisfy that assumption of consistent changes in storage that we see in this area over here. So that's why I believe that the estimated change in storage is biased a little bit high, largely because of just the methodology that we use. And so this is the exact same plot that we showed earlier for the Fillmore Basin, just for the Piru Basin. And so you can see that before this water year, Piru Basin actually started off a little bit higher than relative to the 1988 conditions. So even though the change in storage has been a lot greater compared to the Fillmore Basin, they started off a bit higher. So they were already in a better position at the beginning of the water year. So they're actually still not too bad relative to historical conditions. And we're seeing again at the water year 2016 was the lowest point for both basins. And so we're not quite there yet. Another dry year or two, we could potentially be there. There's something to be aware of. And that's pretty much all I have. Again, this is mostly a show and tell because this is just a summarization of the data that happened over the previous water year. If there's any other questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
I had a question about the annual report. So if we, see that there's monitoring wells that might be breaching minimum threshold, and I think this question is more for Tony. Do we have to put any recommendations that we are even considering into the annual report to DWR on how we envisage? I know in our GSP we have trigger points which link to management actions, but I'm just wondering if that needs to be addressed in the annual report in any way.
You certainly have the flexibility of putting just about anything you want into the annual report. Our approach is to give the DWR exactly what they asked for and not much else. No, I don't think it's necessary that you put in there what you intend to do because you don't know what you intend to do yet. And in addition, these individual wells in each of the basins that look like they might be approaching their minimum threshold, those are only one wells. That doesn't kick you over. It doesn't trigger anything in your process that you outlined in the GSP. So it's one of those things where the board's aware, they'll continue to monitor it. And if that area of impact begins to expand or other wells fall into that category of approaching their minimum threshold, at that point, then you would weigh that against what you said in the GSP. If more than 25% or whatever number is established, in various basins or different ways, then you can implement some sort of action to do that, to deal with that. But you don't have to, in the annual report, prescribe something based on a future condition that may or may not occur.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions for Gus?
Yeah,
It looks like, yeah, Dan has his hand up.
Gus, is it correct to note that up through 2019, those storage change estimates are from our groundwater flow model, our regional model, and the last 2 years are the methods you've just been describing that it's probably prone to overestimation?
Correct. Yeah. And so, yeah, this is one of the disadvantages of not having the model being run is there is a little bit of a lack of consistency in that data. And so unfortunately, we just didn't have a lot of time to reconcile those two because, we submitted the GSP at the end of January and then beginning of April, these are due.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we're trying to do the best we can. We have heard from some of our sources at DWR that especially this first annual report is largely going to be glossed over and it's going to be checking boxes. And so we're trying to satisfy the requirements without going overboard because you can always add to them on the next year.
Yeah, agreed. But I just want to note we have our worst change in storage on record, and it's probably overstated, like you described.
Yes, I think it's probably more accurate for the Fillmore Basin, but for the Piru Subbasin, I definitely believe that it's an overestimate, and we will add that language into the annual report as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's move on.
Thank you very much.
Moment,
Thank
Director
you.
McFadden. Offer a comment. We have the
Please.
annual reports here, and you have copies of the drafts. If there are text edits or things like that you see when you look at the annual reports, please feel free to get those to us, and we'll review and incorporate those as appropriate into these documents as we crank them over from draft to final phase and get them ready to submit. So if you've got comments, please get them into us as quickly as you can, because starting early next week, we're going to be pushing these things towards final and getting them ready to go out the door.
Yeah, and there probably will be likely like small typos and stuff, because I was writing several hundred lines of code at the same time as trying to develop these. So I haven't done my full QA/QC through them yet. It was mostly just trying to get the general workflow established and then go and clean things up. So for example, we have the same surface water extractions for both Fillmore and Piru basins. And so I just need to add a filter onto one of the lines to correct that.
Just want to make sure the board, they do have the opportunity to provide comments should you wish to.
Yes, please send me an email directly, or you can pass them through Ava. I'm more than happy to hear any and all comments that the board members have.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Tony Morgan, is there anything else for 4A, or does that conclude the report on the annual report?
That concludes.
Okay, it's listed on our agenda as a motion item, but I think it's an informational item. So it's, as Kelly would say, receive and file, I believe.
Yeah, Chair McFadden, yeah, that was just listed if the board decided to give any direction on this. But our recommendation is, get any comments to our consultant. They'll wrap these up and they'll get them submitted. SIGMA does not require the board to adopt these. So at this point, it's informational. There are some things that we want to watch, because last year was one of our lowest water years in history, or at least in recent history. So we're going to want to watch this, but we would like to turn our consultants loose to finish those. Both Dan Detmer and Zach Hansen have provided some comments directly to guests. So he'll be taking a look at those and incorporating those in this final draft. So I think overall, this is a great work in a very short time for our first one. And we hope to get these better as we go. And as Gus was talking about, we're going to do our best to gather voluntary pumping data on a quarterly basis. So some of the pumping data and things were estimated, because we did not actually have October pumping data. So we'll be moving forward on that. So with the goal of making these reports better and more useful as we go forward.
What I would suggest to the board is that we so we turn the consultants loose, and perhaps set a date, a last date by which comments can be received. Tony Morgan, is there would you like to set a drop dead date on this for comments?
In a perfect world, I would say Monday, Tuesday next week.
And how does the board feel about that?
That's fine.
It's fine with me.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Okay, so you said Monday, Tuesday. Shall we say last chance for comments, the end of the day, end of the business day on Tuesday, the 22nd?
That works. That works.
Okay,
So
very good.
Chair McFadden, I've got just a follow-up question for Tony on, are pumpers going to, or well owners going to get a form to fill out for April recording?
Yes.
Good.
The assumption is we will get that for April. Yes.
Thank you.
So is that going to come out in a separate mailing, Tony Emmer?
Yes, it would, Chairman Fadden.
Okay. was going to say, please go take photographs. I'll do it. Okay, anything else before A? Tony Everett, Tony Morgan? Very good.
Nothing
Let's
here.
move.
I'm good,
Okay.
thank you.
Let's move on to 5A, government advocacy platform development. Tony Emmert, do you have something that you'd like to say, or just refer to the examples that you have given us?
Chairman Cudden, I did not, given that the direction last time was to, as a next step, to take a look at these advocacy platforms from our 3 member agencies as well as the urban counties. We've provided those in the agenda package, and my suggestion would be on the next step on this would be to perhaps have a discussion more along the lines of what we think we want the agency to take on and be involved in, and then circle back to looking at the advocacy position, right? So, so we have a little bit more discussion on that, and then we can determine what tools we need. As I had said before, I don't anticipate that this agency is going to have a legislative advocate in Sacramento or DC. And one of the things that I've thought about since our last meeting is we do have advocates that are hired by our 3 member agencies in the city of Fillmore, in the county of Ventura, and United Water, and in both Sacramento and DC. So there are some things that we could perhaps do some coordination with those agencies if we were interested in, say, advocating for funding in a certain area. That would be the most straightforward way to do that. But I think as far as this agency, it would be best to talk a little bit more in perhaps a workshop format on the types of things that this agency is interested in within the bounds of what a Sigma agency can do, right? So we may have things that we're all interested in different ways, but we have a fairly limited scope here as far as a Sigma agency. So that might be a next step after we've reviewed these legislative platforms, and then also thinking about how we could utilize an advocate that somebody else is paying for if we want to hit the bigger picture issues.
Are you looking for a general guidelines from the board tonight, or do we need to save that for an agendized item in the next full board meeting?
I am not looking for any kind of specific direction here. I think if I got it wrong, I apologize, but I thought our next step was to provide these to the board and provide opportunity to agendize this in the future. So if I'm headed in the right direction on this, perhaps we could have something that would be more of a workshop format or a mini workshop in the future where we could have stakeholders weigh in also on some of the things that they might like to see or not. I mean, we may have some stakeholders that say, we don't want you to do anything except your annual report and the minimum you can do. We may have stakeholders that say, we want you to participate in, X, Y, and Z projects. And so that, I think our GSPs gave us, a few items that your board wants us to pursue, and those were listed by Tony Morgan, and the things that we're working on in his update earlier, and we will continue to work on those. But aside from that, we don't have very many things on the hopper that this agency is doing. So I think that would be my recommendation is to if the board desires, we could schedule a future workshop to talk about the what a little bit more and flush out the scope, and then circle back and say, what do we need in our toolbox? Do we need this kind of direction for advocacy? Do we want to flush out some of these other projects? So that would be my suggestion for a future meeting.
I'll open it up for comments from the board. My feeling would be that we probably want to discuss this more on the board before we put together go to the effort and expense of putting together a separate workshop. I think we do need to have more board discussion. You've given us a lot to read, but I think we need to discuss it as a board first before we take it further. What are the, I won't ask for a motion or anything, but what comments are there from the rest of the board?
My only comment is that maybe what would be helpful is looking at these platforms that Tony's provided, but in regard to our guiding principles as well, as an organization, and see, what things in these platforms would support our guiding principles. We obviously aren't at a large project list place for implementation projects. So I think the guiding principles are probably going to be a helpful starting point. Once more projects get identified and outlined, then we can also add specific projects to be funded. But I think types of projects can be outlined from what's being put in the guiding principles.
So I think my comment would be in response to that. I think we've pretty clearly defined who we are and what we want to do through our guiding principles, and I would just question what else we need. Okay, any other comments, questions, opinions?
I have a comment, and that is something that I can do, is talk to my council about our next platform, and talk about, just tell them about the discussion that we're having here within the GSA, and sort of check in with the council regarding our next platform, if they're amendable to including perhaps more specific bullet points under our environmental protections or natural resources regarding groundwater. I'm happy to start that conversation with our city council.
Thank you, Director. Okay, if there's nothing else, last chance, I'll move on from 5A. Okay, future topics for board discussion. We've already said that I think we're in agreement that we need a special meeting to review, discuss, and decide what we're going to do with the potential contract. Would the board, is it the pleasure of the board that we try to set a date tonight, as long as we're all here together, or most of us are together, that would work for us? I would suggest that how much time do we need to get something ready, Mr. O'Neill and Mr. Emmer? I think we have something.
I can have a draft for Tony tomorrow.
Okay, so that's not a timing issue. How soon would the board like to get together? Do you want to try to have a quick emergency meeting sometime next week? Is that too soon?
Next week's fine.
We need to make sure that Tony Emmert has time to do the conflict check, I would say.
A follow-up question, does anybody know if Chair Long is she out of town, or does she just have a conflict tonight?
She's out of town and had a conflict tonight, so all of the above.
Because it will be, I would imagine it will be very easy for me to get a hold of United's legal counsel. I could maybe use some help in getting a hold of City of Fillmore's legal counsel. And I think the place that I may run into some trouble is getting a quick turnaround response from county's legal counsel regarding this. I would like to hear from them, but I'm not quite sure who that would be that we would bring this to. I think in the past issues regarding the taxation, we had talked to Alberto Boada. I'm not sure if he's the person that we would talk to on this issue.
Yeah, Tony, I believe he was a deputy, but they have a pretty new county council who was the assistant county council at Riverside. I might be able to help in that regard and getting in touch with, you probably want to talk to the main county council.
Okay. I don't have any relationship with that person. I probably could get a return phone call from Alberto, because he, I believe, still does work at the Fox Canyon GMA and might respond in a timely way. But yeah, we probably need a couple days to do that. And then I think we could meet if it's about a week from now. That certainly gives us enough time to put the agenda together and the agreement.
Do you want to set a tentative date of the evening of Thursday, the 24th, subject to Kelly's schedule?
That sounds good.
Yeah, the 24th works for me.
I may also, Chairman Cotton, being that I believe March 17th to April 21st is one of those times that we may exceed the 30 days for the AB 361. So if we're going to have a special meeting, does the board mind if I put another time extension on there so we hit that 30 days? I'm not sure if anybody's going to be keeping track of this regarding whether we hit 30 days on the nose or not, but I may do that just to be, it's pretty easy to do that. So it would be 2 agenda items. It would be the legal counsel agreement. And I think if we're expeditious on this, we can definitely get that one on there too.
That sounds good. You can even have a one item consent calendar too.
Okay.
Okay,
Oh,
so tentatively the 24th, but we'll see if that actually works out. For now, it sounds like at least most of us can do that. We'll have to check on Chair Long. So we'll, Tony, maybe you and Eva communicate with us and communicate with Chair Long, and we'll see if that can work out.
We'll let you know. We'll shoot for the 24th.
Okay, and then 2 items we discussed for the next regular meeting as agenda items would be discussion and motion on hosting the database. And then there was interest in the subsidence update from our consultants. Are there any other items that I've missed that we need to include? Gone.
I would just.
Candace, did you
I
have
know that
something?
there was another round of Sigma implementation funding coming up. Are we planning on applying to that at all? Is there something that might be a good fit for that?
Director Mennigan, our goal would be to flush out our projects as quickly as we can, the things that are already in our GSPs, and then see if we can line those up. And another one would be if we do come up with an extra site for a monitoring well, then that would be the type of thing I think that would be ideal for another round of Sigma funding. I have not heard about what the timing is of that. I know that in general, DWR has been overwhelmed by trying to get grant funding out. And so we've seen many of their tentative schedules slip. So for example, the IRWM grants went from summer to fall to winter. And I wouldn't be surprised if it turns out to be spring 2023. So that gives all of us a little bit more time to flush some of these out and have better applications. So, but yes, the short answer is we would like to be positioned to where we can put an application in if we have a good project.
Okay.
Okay, is there anything else that, go ahead, Tony.
One thing I was saying that I think I mentioned several months ago, and it may not be next month, but Dan did reach out to a contact at LA County Sanitation Districts on behalf of the folks that are working on the chloride discharge lowering project with the plants out there, and they did agree to come and give an update presentation if this board would like that. If that's something you'd like in the next month or two, we can try to get them scheduled.
That'd be great. Yeah. Thank you.
Very interesting. Love to hear that. Okay, anything else that needs to come before the board? Hearing none, I'll adjourn the meeting at whatever time it is, 6:32. Thank you all for coming. Thanks to all our presenters and guests.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
I'm trying to push the button, but it's not doing anything. I cut out 3 times during the meeting. And I had
And
to
now that you want
scramble
to,
get
still
back.
won't.
I didn't know what happened. Okay, here we go.
Have a good night.